some of the things that you dealt with professionally that preceded your ability to go into these large companies and turn those around?
Ben, I think it goes way back. It goes back to when I was in college. I was very involved in the college community. So I liked organization, I liked people, and I liked getting results. So from a standpoint, I was the president of my fraternity. I was the president of the football club. I ran the biggest blood drive in Western New York at that time, like 1,200 people for 2 days in a row. So I think that, maybe it was part of my DNA, but it really was that desire to organize big events and to be very successful in regard to motivating people. And I enjoyed that. So as I exited college in 1973, it wasn't a great job market, but I was fortunate enough to have that on my resume, those things that I accomplished in college. So I had a variety of different options to go to work for. And I went to work for a company, unbeknownst to me, I knew they were a Fortune 500 company, Cheeseboro Ponds, that was growing at extraordinary rates. So early on in my career as a young 20s, I was given an opportunity by osmosis to learn an extraordinary amount of things. I mean, the company was moving at light speed. And their strategy was to acquire regional companies that had great brands, and then grow them had to be the number one or number two in the market within 5 years, or they got rid of them. So early on, I was in that environment. And again, I had great leadership, I had great people. Their philosophy was give you lots of training, but give you lots of room to go forward and get some things accomplished.
So a lot of feedback from mentorship, a lot of it almost sounds like it's a cutthroat type of environment where if you're not performing, then you're pretty much cut off at that point.
Yeah, no, it really wasn't. It was more a team-based environment where, okay, you 10 people are going to go out and we need to build a plant in California, and this is why we need to build it. And you're going to do X and you're going to do Y. And we had a tremendous amount of what I'll call subject matter experts in our corporate organization that you could call on.
Yeah.
So as a young kid in my mid-20s, I had 40 or 50 public warehouses reporting to me, and I had to go out to each of them twice to inspect them because they were storing our food grade products. And as a result, I met 40 or 50 different people around the country that all had different philosophies, had different experiences. Some guys in their 80s that have been in the business 100 years, and some entrepreneurs that have been in it 100 days. So that type of experience you can't pay for. People ask me why I never got an MBA. I said I got my MBA on an aisle seat at American Airlines.
To segue into Catalyst Paper, one of the things that I found interesting that you want to implement was to have almost all your mid-level managers interact with 75 to 100 employees on the ground per day. Is that kind of where you got that philosophy from that experience?
No, yeah, I guess by you in your career, and that's why I challenge young executives that want to continue to aggressively pursue a larger organizations or a larger role in any organization, is my term, don't become a one-trick pony. Don't be, and maybe if you want to be the expert, don't be this narrow and 100 miles high. Be really wide and pretty deep, right? That's what it requires. So in a lot of my turnarounds, at a very young level in my career, what I found out is that the people on the floor, if you listen to them and gave them some real personal attention, they had the answers. Many times the executive was either trying to do too much, didn't believe in the workforce, dealt with harsh union workforces. Not that union workforces are bad, but there's a lot of interaction that has to take place. So I found that, going to the workforce and asking people that had done the job for 30 years how to do it and secondly, I've set you my operating philosophy. When I went out into the factory every day, when I was running the factory as a general manager in Buffalo, I had about 1,800 employees, and it was 1 million square feet. And to walk that factory and see pretty much all the operations was about 45 minutes, and that was at a good pace. But along the way, if somebody was doing something really good, I stopped and congratulated them. If somebody was sitting down and doing something I shouldn't be doing, I went up and asked them, hey, we're in a war here against our competitors, and we're trying to please our customers. I need to be fully focused, especially for safety issues. When I took over Catalyst, it had the second worst safety rate in all of North America from standpoint of the top 20 paper mills. And by using that philosophy as a CEO and having my managers embrace it, we went to number 2, the second best safety record in about 14 months in all of North America. So it works. It's worked for me. And that's why I encouraged for young executives to shamelessly steal some of my good ideas that I've developed over the last 40 years. Because I did the same with the people when I sat at the right hand of some of the best business people in North America.
Yeah, and I feel like what I found is a lot of the times you could learn a lot more from others' mistakes, and you can learn those things quicker in comparison to trying to experience those things yourself. Learn from other people so you're not making those same mistakes and you're expediting that process.
Right.
And, one of the things too is when it comes to contributing to an entire organization, an organization as large as 15,000 people, companies that I've worked for only emphasize that the sales team, the marketing team, they're the only people who are bringing in money to the company. And I took a look at the letter that you wrote to Catalyst and all the employees, and you made it seem like everyone had a financial impact on that organization. And how important do you feel like it is that every employee feels like they're making a contribution to that bottom line versus it's only the salespeople who are making a contribution and the rest of the staff is almost like an expense, or they're expendable in a sense?
Yeah, one of the things that I truly believe in, and I think it's important. First of all, I'll go back to your first point. My dad, it was interesting. I was walking out of the house going to the airport to go to college, and he stopped me and he said, "You know what? I want you to look and learn from everybody." I said, "Dad, well, what does that mean?" I said, "Well, first of all," he said to me, he said, "you're going to learn some incredible things by watching people on what to do and how to act." I was 17 at the time. And he says, you're going to learn a lot of stuff and see the consequences of doing stuff you shouldn't be doing from other people. Mm-hmm. So don't ignore anybody. But, so have the basis of constantly have your radar, my term, your radar on, of looking at how to do the right things in life and have the right compass, and shamelessly steal those good ideas and put them in your toolkit. And when you see something like that you shouldn't be doing, say, okay, I need to avoid that. So I wanted to address that, but you're right on. In my operating philosophy, I tell people every person is a salesperson. They have an internal customer and they have an external customer. Every transaction affects the company financially, one way or the other. So when you start to get people to realize that, and they realize how powerful they are, the momentum that you can make, even as a large executive, an executive running a large company, that momentum moves at light speed. And it was very evident Catalyst. When I took Catalyst over, it had lost $100 million in the first 6 months of 2010. Finger pointing had become an art form. There was all sorts of craziness going on. The senior management had a class action lawsuit against the company, which the board never told me about before I took the job. But being on the ground, letting people know what you expect of them. And unlike many senior executives, I expect people to operate a notch and a half above their decision-making level. I'm willing to give the right people the authority to move the organization at light speed. And when you do that, and you give them guidelines. So you have my operating philosophy, and if you want to post that, the covenants of it, feel free. I think people might better understand the conversation we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it comes down to accountability. I noticed you put accountability in there, and being able to hold people accountable. You're going to give them that opportunity to perform, but also hold them accountable to make sure that they're following through with those activities. And I noticed one of the things you downsized, I think it was, you could probably elaborate on a little bit more, but downsized about 30% of the corporate staff and then dispersed control into the individual plants that you're dealing with. So you're putting the power into the people who are actually experts within that management group, rather than having people who are making these decisions not necessarily the most experts at making them. And I guess the question that I have for you would be, how were you able to establish that trust and leadership going into a company that, they may look at you like, who the hell is this guy walking in here? And who is he to say that we're going to be implementing these types of solutions?
Well, when you're burning $10 million a month in cash, you can't sit there and have a 6-month study about anything. But remember, I had just come out as the group president of Quebecor World.
Yeah.
Restructuring that company over 18 months. I was given a lot of plants that were seriously ill, had been undercapitalized, had all sorts of problems. The market was falling tremendously in volume in traditional print. So that group is actually 18,000, 15,000 in the US and 3,500 plus in Latin America. So I was given the magazine division to incorporate it and create the group publishing division. Unfortunately, we took that company through bankruptcy, and I had to close probably 15 plants. Like I like to say, it's very difficult. You got to drop the flag on the field and go to the tape, unemotionalize the decision, and to sort of save the company, I had to cut some of the weak parts out. And I had to take 6,000 or 7,000 people out of that organization, which was extraordinarily painful.
Yeah.
So I was unfortunately, I had spent 2 years doing that, and I had spent a lifetime of organizing companies and making them stronger. So as a result of that, that organization became much stronger. We sold the company, I left the company, and then I went out to run Catalyst. So in the first 30 days, I looked at the organization, and the first thing I did was met with the corporate staff and told them there was going to be sizable changes. I had a more of a decentralized management style. The people closest to the decision should make them, and the people in the corporate office were the subject matter experts that could be flown out to the mills or whatever to help along the way. My predecessor was an accountant. There's nothing wrong with accountants, but he wanted to measure everything, even if it was insignificant. So he had built a company that was measuring all sorts of things, but not making decisions and quickly. So I knew I had to act quickly. Fortunately, it was the right decision. We wound up having the lowest SG&A in all of North America for large paper companies. It was one of the things that helped us move not only the cost reduction, but I think more importantly, making critical decisions and moving at light speed for us when we were burning that amount of cash. I mean, one of the first things I did as the CEO there, we had a mill that was in a state of suspended animation. It was costing us $45 million a year. And it was never going to run again. Maybe on a wing and a prayer. We had no fiber to fiber the mill. We had all sorts of problems with our workforce. It was in the wrong marketplace. It was in the wrong geography. Other than that, it was almost perfect. And I had to close it. I went to, it was closed. It wasn't operating, but it was I needed to shutter it. I went to my new board 30 days as the CEO and said, I'm going to take a $378 million impairment. So I'm sure they took a gulp and they said, oh boy, we're trusting this guy. And we did it. Saved us $45 million on a run rate basis. And that was one of the first key signals I was sending the community. Things were going to radically change here.
Yeah.
And to your point, I did decentralize the management and downsize the corporate office by about 35 or 40 people, which was about 30%.
Yeah. And what would you say is the common theme among ineffective leadership, or when you're coming into, upper management and you're looking at the C-level, is there a common theme that you see with ineffective leadership that you can change? Or is is it more of an organizational issue?
No, I think it's a great question. I haven't got that before, so I think I appreciate you asking that question. I think it's really about the bunker mentality. So if you're there, your business is falling, your competition's killing you, and you elect to take the position to go in and drop your prices or do this, then you can't do this, and then you're not out. You go into the bunker, you're not talking to your employees, and of course the rumor mill takes off. So when you're there, go head on. Go out, tell people we're in trouble. The market's falling. We got to do this. Everybody's got to pull on the rope. I made hard decisions quickly. I didn't make them by myself. I used my subject matter experts. I was close to the employees. So I knew when I took over Catalyst, it was going to be a 3-year total, full marathon.
Yeah.
The only people that could solve that problem long-term with 7,000 employees. I couldn't, one person. I could get in, I could restructure it. I couldn't unless I changed that culture. That company was not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So during that period of time, we tremendously changed that culture. Just not me. I had a great senior staff. So the leaders that go in the bunker think they can do it all by themselves, don't communicate with their workforce, are unable to mine the workforce for talent, and which I think is the primary responsibility of a leader. I don't care where you are. If you're a supervisor, you're a general manager, you're the CFO, you're the chief revenue officer, you need to mine your organization. Yeah. In Quebecor, like I said, I had almost 18,000 employees. We targeted about 125 subject matter experts, people that were extraordinary. And we had 145 plants around the world. So if I had an ink problem, I was printing Harry Potter, I was printing the best issue of Rolling Stone, and I had a problem with the ink, and we couldn't solve it locally. We were able to call another plant or someone that was the intergalactical ink expert of the world. And they were usually able over the phone, like we're talking, we didn't have Zoom or, I guess we were at Skype. We were at Skype then. And they were able to take my technical people or my operating people through and say, did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try? Bingo. There's a neutron microscope theory of my operating philosophy.
That was the next question I was going to ask you, is if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. Because I read that in your dissertation, the neutron microscope theory, and having your employees, your frontline employees, be able to discover those types of issues and relying. I think a lot of companies, upper management makes these types of decisions rather than relying on the people on the front line to be able to solve the issues and provide solutions for companies. So if you have any more examples of that, or if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, that'd be,
So I've done a lot of turnarounds in my career. Even when I was a young kid, I had gotten very good at looking at operating problems because, again, my MBA on American Airlines, I had to go to these 50 locations twice a year. That was 100 inspections. Dealing with people from, let's say, Boston to Oregon to Central Texas to California to deep in Florida, if you look at the U.S., there's so many different cultures. So meeting all of those people, and we had operating problems, and we built warehouses and we built plants. So when it really got down to it, I realized that there was a tremendous source of information if you mind it. So, for example, one of the first things I did, and I'll use Catalyst because we'll stay on point there. A typical paper mill is huge. Has its own railroads. It has many times its own ferries. It has an extraordinary amount of assets, and usually are significantly populated with 2,000-3,000 people. The mill I'm going to talk about was Port Alberni, which was the middle of Vancouver Island. As a new CEO, I wandered around. Like I said, I wanted to meet people, and people got a sense that that was part of my operating philosophy. Now, I think they were testing me to see how sincere I was. So one of the supervisors that I had talked to said, next time you come back, I'd like you to meet with this group. And I said, fine. I didn't even ask him what the agenda is. So here I am. Nobody wears a tie in Vancouver, so I didn't have a tie on as a CEO. I wander out, and what they call the wood room is not a room. It's just this big area out in the mill. And they have pulp logs. And here these guys are out, and they're in these orange suits. They all look like they're about 9 feet tall. And 3 of them had, ZZ Top beards. And here's this CEO from New York coming in, new guy. Wander out, it's got a drizzle on, and I didn't care. I wander out, and supervisor, they stop all these huge pieces of equipment. They come up, and they said, well, we got a suggestion for you. I said, fire away. He says, right now, for some reason, you guys are having all these pulp logs, a portion of them floated over somewhere else and ground up and then brought in as chips. We can do it, $15,000 a month cheaper if you give us a few more people. I said, okay, let me think about that. I get on my phone right there. I call my guy in the corporate office and I said, Bob, I want all the pulp logs sent to Port Alberni. I don't want them outsourced anymore. These guys are the intergalactical pulp chippers of the world. And they laughed. Are going to do this $15,000 a month cheaper, $100,000 a year we're going to save. He says, okay, boss. Sure enough, I turn around and said, boys, you're on. I said, I'll be back in 2 months to see how you're doing. And if you accomplish what you're doing, you're going to have this forever. And I'll apologize that we made a stupid decision, but now we're on our way. Guess what? They were 100% right. So that $15,000 a month wasn't the real issue. The real issue was that went through the company like wildfire. This guy is going to listen to you.
Yeah. So
there was a tremendous amount of other ideas that came forward. The previous CEO was anti people. He didn't want to go out. He thought the people were more problematic than they were part of the resource. My belief is, again, that company had hundreds of thousands of years of experience. Quebecor, 400,000 years of experience. So if you're not out there mining it, and of course I couldn't do it myself, but as you said, every one of my senior executives and every one of their people, I wanted them to be in their operations 3 times a day, wandering around and physically come up and engage with the person in their organization. That way, the senior management probably saw almost all the employees every week in their big operating in their facilities, and those employees had an opportunity to positively connect and share great information with the and like I said before, the interaction wasn't always positive. Somebody was doing something seriously wrong from a safety perspective. I told my people, don't ever walk past somebody doing something wrong safety-wise. And the other thing is, there was something on the floor as a CEO, a big piece of plastic. I picked it up. I took it to the garbage. If I could do it, I expected everybody in every one of my facilities, and many of my customers came in and said, I can't believe how clean your facility is. Did you clean the whole facility? I said, no, you can come back here anytime unannounced, and it should be in the same condition.
Yeah. And what would you say with the current economic landscape? What do you think the biggest issue is with upper management and CEOs running their company, and what separates the most successful ones compared to the ones that are falling behind? Because I know right now technology is huge, but that's not, in my opinion, that's not the only thing that matters is technology. It's being able to adapt and be able to evolve within your organization. And if you, because when you're changing these companies, we didn't necessarily need Zoom and we weren't social distancing. So if you could elaborate on ways that you were able to adapt and transform some of these organizations and the fundamental principles on how to make that change. Because I think for me personally, when I go into an organization and making change, it's not implementing that solution, but it's getting everyone within the organization to buy in to making that change. So if you could elaborate on how you could get your people to believe in you and believe in that system and the why we're making these changes.
Well, let me contemporize it. I don't know if you saw that the chairman of Microsoft, sort of counterintuitive, said, whoa, 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 don't let everybody work from home. You guys are going in the wrong direction. Anybody believes that that's a truism is and he's selling Microsoft Teams, right? Which encourages that. So that's sort of counterintuitive, but he's 100% right.
Yeah.
If you read my operating philosophy and all the tenets of it, I put in a productive office design system,
Mm-hmm.
which means, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I put it in all my companies because I really believe in how powerful it is, and I'll expand on that. But had all the accounting people that sat together, and you had all of the transportation people and all the sales people. And I said, no. I've been sitting in this desk for 30 years. Well, I'm sorry, you're going to move. And I put together these pods that either were business driven or had another functionality. So now you had, let's say, 8 people sitting in the same geography, managing a business. And now you had the person that was scheduling it, the salesperson, the accounting people, the billing people, et cetera, et cetera. So by osmosis, I changed the orientation. By osmosis, these people are, what do we do here? 8 people become smarter. It eliminated email. It eliminated voicemail. The one objective was radically improve the service to the manufacturing facilities so you could radically improve the service to the customer. So you had a newbie coming in. They were trained. You had vacation coverage already in. You had a promotional track. When you came into that pod, there was 4 other higher level jobs that knew if you worked hard and you listened and you were team-based and you were willing to share work when somebody was overloaded, you had 3 to 4 promotional opportunities right in front of you. So you're highly motivated. And all of those pods looked at their different customers and business. We had an innovation index that they were charged with. People resisted it. Again, the hardest thing you do as a senior executive is get people to embrace change. Again, one of my favorite quotes from Darwin. It's not the strongest or the most intelligent of the species that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. If you look at organizations that are successful, led by great leaders, they're people that they're either the executive or the culture of the organization is embracing change and goes at light speed toward that. Make sure that their people are motivated, communicated to, and they have the personal responsibility. When I took over Catalyst, people were like, well, you got to do this for safety and you got to do this. And they wanted us to put safety officers in that had nothing to do with their safety. There were security guards. And I said, no, what we're going to do is you're going to be personal. I'm going to provide the best, safest workforce for you in North America. Everybody in this plant, including me, is going to be diligent about safety. And one of the examples of that is that I put in what I'll call a Hawthorne theory, where I had every piece of equipment we could look at, not the equipment, but the results of the equipment on a daily basis. And people went in and compared their mills against other mills. And I put right before the productivity, it was reportable and lost time accidents. And everybody knew I did not want any world records at the expense of body parts. So that's what good leaders do. It's not just Kool-Aid through the fire hose. What you say is what you do. And you know what? People have long memories, especially now. I tell young kids, if you're going on the internet, putting a bunch of crazy stuff on there, it's going to come back and haunt you.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said is having 100% transparency and being completely honest with your workforce, not only the workforce, but your customers. And what I found, starting off in sales, when I was negotiating contracts and you want to get the sale, but there are little maybe steps that you leave out of there just to get the sale in a sense. And 3 months down the line, it bites you in the ass. But the more transparent that you are and the more honest that you are, that has had tremendous effects on me, because then not only do they trust you, but then they're referring you to different types of customers, and you're getting referrals, and you just feel better about yourself. The amount of morale that you have, and the amount of confidence that you have when you can be transparent to a customer, because the bottom line is, if you're not transparent, then maybe the product's not right for you, or you're not doing a good enough job selling the value of your product. So I've always found that's why when reading your fundamentals, and I couldn't agree with you more than 100%, because I think that has as a salesperson, has changed me from being a good salesperson to someone who's ethical and a much better salesperson, just being honest and transparent. And I feel like that's why salespeople get a bad reputation, is because they'll mislead some customers in order to get a contract, when in reality, when you're honest, that's how you're going to get referrals, to be able to build a sustainable growth in business. I think that's one of the most important fundamentals. And I guess one thing that moving forward with the current economic landscape, where do you think that companies are going to be going in the future, and how do you think leadership is going to play an impact on making sure that these companies that may not be doing so well can survive and still, I guess, maintain their operations throughout this economic crisis?
Well, one of the things you said, I totally agree with on a sales perspective. Too many people sell purely on price.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sell purely on price, it's usually out of desperation, right?
Yep.
So from a perspective of that, we looked at our pods providing holistic, valued solutions. So for example, we had a customer who I won't name, because I can name them, Eckerd Drutt, because they're no longer, they've been absorbed. I was very interested in, they had a program that was huge, and it was 10 or 12 times a year. It was a print program. So we did our normal due diligence. We knew a lot about who they were, and we understood that they were having troubles with their present vendor on getting to the market consistently. So I actually designed a product that fit our equipment perfectly well, and created a new solution for them. And I actually told them I was going to charge them 4 or 5% more than they were paying. And the event was about $10 million, right? So it's a $500,000 upcharge to come to me as a new supplier. And people in my organization thought I was crazy. I said, absolutely not. But what we did sell them with is getting to the market. I compressed their schedule. They could give us their ad 16 days later than our competition. Their competition and had done this product for 8 or 10 years, had never delivered it 100% on time to all 400 newspapers in the US. I promised them I could do that and take 16 days out of the schedule. But they had to embrace my design, which was a little bit different than what they were getting. It wasn't greatly different. They didn't believe it. So I said, listen, if I don't do it, it'll be $1 million penalty. I'll rebate back $1 million. So off we went. We did the first one. They gave us the ad 16 days, actually almost 18 days later. We produced every product and we delivered all 400 newspapers, with about 60% of them being 5 days early. So what happens there? We wind up with a 7 or 8 year contract at 10 or $15 million a year, $100 million contract, because we just didn't say, okay, let's just do the normal. In fact, you know what? The only way we're going to get this business is to cut our price by 5 or 7% and put us in a position where we're on the razor's edge that we really can't make money. So we got volume in a plant that's struggling, on a product that we're forcing on equipment that doesn't fit. So those are classic problems that people that aren't connected to their organization make. And then what happens? You lose your credibility at the work where people are saying, what are those guys in the tower doing? They're killing us. Rather than the other way. And actually, functionally, after we had that work, my team proposed more and different products. And I went to my manufacturing team, and if you can do this, I mean, I told them what I needed. I didn't know how to do it. These little skunk works, people got together. Again, people that had been doing all this work for, in a composite of 10 people, probably 300 or 400 years. They put their knowledge together and created a whole new product that just ripped the market apart positively for us. Another example of that is you got to be strategic. You're looking. So we had newsprint. Newsprint is probably the biggest commodity that exists in the world. Newsprint 15 years ago in North America was maybe 18 million tons a year. Now it's maybe 2.5 to 3 million. You want to see a market that's fallen apart? I had phone directory at the same time. I had newsprint and phone directory technology on the West Coast in this mill, Port Alberni. So I said to my guys, I said, listen, what I need you to do is transition that directory to a lighter weight newsprint so that it feels the same, but it's 15 or 17% lighter. And they were able to figure that out. So I said, okay, where's my best opportunity to sell this? My best opportunity with my geography to sell that in Latin America, where you had individual publishers making those decisions, not these big consortiums, right? So we took a business from 10,000 tons to 200,000 tons, transitioned it from a dying market to a new lighter weight newsprint market in an area that was growing traditionally. And my competition, where they were located in Montreal, couldn't get to Latin America as effectively as I could. So I shared the weight differential, right? So the people were getting newsprint 17, they were getting the utility of it, but it was 17% lighter. So I shared 7% of that. And so I took the other 10%. 10% as a premium on a product that was disappearing. So that's when you're mining the organization. And the biggest criticism, if any other CEOs ever would watch this interview, go into your organization today, and if you haven't, identify 2 people that take your place. I don't care who they are. Make sure that they're capable in 3 years of taking your place. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. That's what I also see critical failure in organizations, and not just the CEO. The general managers, the sales executives. And again, if you're embracing that pod philosophy, those people by osmosis are gaining knowledge about your business and about your industry. So every part of your industry, you have to have very aggressive, robust development plans for key positions. In my print organization, I had 600 people identified. 3 down that reported to me, people that reported to me. And we had a lot of people on a development track, and that proved to be part of our strongest weapon against our competition. So yeah. I hope that answers your question in that regard.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things that changed my whole perspective, when I finished college, I ended up moving out to California, never in sales in my life. I hated sales. But one of my best friends worked as a entry-level personal training counselor at LA Fitness. He's the one who kind of got me into sales. And the most important fundamental thought that he had was train and develop and hire a rep that you're going to develop who's better than you. And he went from being an entry level rep to a club manager to a regional manager, and now he's a VP of the Pennsylvania, Washington area in a matter of 5 years. And it's not because he's the best sales rep, but it's because he's able to train and develop sales reps that are better than them. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that managers make is, or even organizations make, is that they hire the best quote unquote salesperson, where that salesperson, they may be good at sales, but they're not good at training and developing, reps, where they're not holding them to the same standards and have the same criteria that you do as a coach. And I think that's how you really get an organization to grow and flourish, is being able to train and develop reps to do your job better than you. Because the bottom line is, if you're training those people to be better than you, then it's going to lead to success. There's it's a successful formula, and that's why I feel so fortunate to be, as much as it was pain in the ass working at an entry level, minimum wage sales position. I wanted to quit maybe after the first 2 weeks. I'm so glad I stuck it out, because those were the fundamentals that I learned about what sales was and how to really build a team and hold yourself accountable to certain standards and train and develop.
I'll give you an example that the people will, maybe some of them look at it every day and pass over it, and others probably have already made the observation. So look at every NBA coach, look at every NFL or AFL coach. How many of them were extraordinary, top of the line Hall of Fame players?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the ability, and that's the term, coach, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you got coaches that played football. Most of them did. They weren't the all-stars, and maybe there's a few, but most of them aren't. They're the ability to communicate, get people coalesced, motivate, good strategy, pick. They got a good support team, a general manager that helps them draft and pick. So that's a great. Your observation's great, and I think the other observation there is, you got to understand sales. You don't, even if you're not the salesperson. Now, in many cases, sales is seen as a liability. It's like, oh, the sales guys, they torture me.
Yep.
Oh, they always want me to do this. Oh, So, I was probably one of the most successful manufacturing people in my company when I was in my mid-30s. Had done a huge turnaround on a greenfield that the chairman of the board, actually the owner, CEO, was distressed about. It was losing $2 or $3 million a month. It was in Clarksville, Tennessee. The sales people actually said, "Hey, if you want to fix, go find this guy." He didn't know me at that time. It was a huge company. I get a call. I meet him down there, and he says, "What do you think?" I said, "Yeah, I can help you fix this." He said, "How long?" I said, 6, 7 months. He goes, "That's impossible." I said, "Well, okay." So I took him out in the factory and showed him a whole bunch of things that were wrong, and they were really pretty simple. And he said, "Okay." So as we drove back to the airport, I said, "Ed, I don't want a negative reward out of this." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" "I'm going to take care of you financially." I said, "I'm not worried about that. I don't want to, when I fix this, I don't want to move here. My kids were young, and the school system up there wasn't what I wanted to put them into." So sure enough, 7 months later, we made $150,000. First call I get is, "Hey, I want you to be the president of that company." I go, "No, Ed, I'm sorry. That's not going to work," right? So he wasn't happy with me. But I'm telling you this lengthy story for a reason. So out of that, here's this guy, a billionaire, who was one of my mentors. I had done what I promised to do, and I was disappointed that he wasn't going to live up to his end of the bargain. He made the request, and so for a period of time, I guess we weren't, I don't want to say talking, but so he called me and he said, "Can we have a good conversation?" I said, "Sure." So I met him in New York and we had dinner, and he said, "Do you ever want to run a huge company?" I said, "That's what I want to do." He said, "Well, Do you trust me? I said, yeah, Ed. I think, oh my God, he's going to ask me to go back to Clarksville, which he did. But what he did say is, if you're going to run a huge company, I want you to take over the North American sales force because we need a lot of rigor and process that you have. I said, Ed, he goes, trust me, if you want to run a company large, you want to be the CEO, general manager, blah, blah, blah. So I trusted him. I did it. It took me, like I tell people, when you make a hard decision, you have to make a hard decision. Go in a dark room and sort of think about it. And, so I made that decision. And I found out it's not that easy to sell. Guys weren't just out there on T&E playing golf. Sales was hard.
Yeah.
And motivating. I had 140 different salespeople, and motivating the hunters and the farmers, and getting the right people, and getting them engaged, and getting them involved in the organization, and being respected, and vice versa, was a lot harder than I thought it was. And what I got out of that was I understood now the inside of the business incredibly well. I understood how it all came together: purchasing, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, you name it, large scale equipment, all of those things. But now getting the whole front end of the business on how it connected was an epiphany for me. So what I would challenge the folks that are going to see this is that point in time. And you ask, when you're a mid-level manager and the organization needs you to hop into a spot and bring your subject matter expertise in there, and you're not the salesperson, but you can motivate all those salespeople and you can create that value for your organization. Do it. By osmosis, you're going to grow. You're going to grow wider and deeper, right? Don't be the one trick pony that's this wide and 100 miles deep.
Yeah. And what do you feel is more important, being able to motivate your sales force, or being able to provide them the resources to be able to strategically plan, segment, target, and position your company in ideal customer profile, so that way when you are targeting these specific prospects, you have a strategy behind it? Or is it more so about having that motivation where you're going to go in, you're going to make 50 calls, you're going to book 10 appointments, and you're going to just hit the ground running? Because that's kind of where I have a bit of conflict with, whereas I'm a person who wants to do the research, wants to do the planning, especially for high-end complex sales. Maybe for transactional sales, it's a lot more volume and you're doing your calls. But when it comes to complex, multi-level decision makers, I feel like the amount of planning and preparation involved with that is a lot more important than the volume or just hitting the phone calls. So
yeah, I mean, the philosophy, I think in today's world, the philosophy to sell anything to anybody is a solution for an absolute disaster. And one of the things that organizations don't do, and I'll be accused of it in our organizations, in some of the organizations that I was in, is this guy came in, he had a great suit, great hairdo, had the Kool-Aid through a fire hose, could speak to anybody. His shoes were always polished. He was going to be a good salesman. Half the time, the onboarding process is so inadequate. People don't even know what they're selling, or they're getting somebody from another competitor, and they just believe that person, since he's been at brand X, is going to come in and they know everything about anything, and they get less of an onboarding. And that's where you are. I mean, so the ability of the organization strategically to say, here's the market I want you to address. Here's why I want you to address. Here is what you're going to do. And what we did, and again, you have hunters and you have farmers, and that's just a fact. If you don't realize that, then you're going to be unsuccessful. Not everybody is going to be a hunter. So what we did is we had a lot of, and we were our salespeople were highly committed and highly compensated, because the deals were very complex.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't sell something over the phone.
No.
These deals were 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 year deals, anywhere from, let's say, on a low end, $3 to $100 million.
Yeah.
So a salesperson was had to be very technical, had to know the organization, had to know the marketplace. Onboarding, extraordinarily important. Strategic market positions, understanding how to sell against the competition, and really, I would never, ever, to this day, allow my people to throw hand grenades against my competition. We always sold our brand, and if that wasn't good enough, then it wasn't good enough. We had to make our brand the best. And if we were just going out and downselling on our competition, it's never a good solution. And that it's proven in my life. Sell your solution. Don't sell against your competitor.
And what do you think is more important? Selling to your, what do you consider that all your prospects are qualified, or is it more important to disqualify certain prospects and eliminate the time that could be wasted with disqualifying candidates rather than making sure that you're only targeting the qualified candidates?
That is a great observation. So when I took Catalyst through bankruptcy, we put the pod philosophy in there, and we did exactly that. We selected the people we wanted to grow with. We selected our alpha customers, and we specifically strategically identified people that we were going to grow, and we liked what they did and why they did it and where we had a great solution. My competition was stunned when we grew in every one of our markets. We grew our markets where we want to grow 4 to 5% while in bankruptcy. We made some really challenging decisions, but we selected the alphas, and that proved extraordinarily important. So where we had a customer that was filling a hole for volume, they were in trouble. They were constantly beating us up for price. They never lived up to their end of the bargain. So, we jettisoned those folks off when the contracts came. We just said, here's our deal. And they didn't take it. So they went and abused somebody else. And we had really, really solid customers that we saw their growth perspective, and we grew with them.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, again, don't sell everything to anybody, because it's a short-term solution. But typically what happens when CEOs get in trouble, some CEOs, they and they have capacity, sell it at any price.
Yeah.
Especially if it's against a competitor. And then you're putting it on equipment where it doesn't fit. You got all these inefficiencies, and volume just kills you in that regard.
Yep. And the customer support, like post-sales support, you're not going to be able to support that type, and the level of margin that you have when you're working with those types of customers, it's costing you more money to try and work with those type of customers. That's why I feel like you really, really have to narrow down who it is that you want to sell to, what market is best for you. So, I think that's one of the biggest problems, especially with smaller businesses. They just want to go out and sell their product to anyone and everyone. We do the best here, best here, best here. But if you really strategically plan and narrow down who it is that you want to sell to, that's where you thrive, because you're able to identify who it is that you want to sell to. And that's just my theory behind that.
In organizations like the ones I've run, where contracts are multi-year, somewhere 3 to 5, 7 years, and huge, you go into a marketplace as a new player, let's say, because you want volume, and people are going to take a risk on you, and the only way they're going to do that is probably going to have to buy your way in the marketplace. And when you do that and you crash and burn, guess what? Everybody knows about it. And then all of those accounts that are out there renew. And now you're in a position where you have a field where there's nobody available for 3 to 5 to 7 years that fit your equipment. So you have to have the courage of your convictions as an organization to sometimes say, hey, you're really good people, but you don't fit our organization. So and sometimes people come to you.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, just force it on there. and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And, you know, most of the time it doesn't work. I'm sure it works sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't work. It's a great question.
Yeah. Man. So, Kevin, if there's anything else that you want to include, otherwise, I can't tell you how
Well,
much I appreciate your time here. And
well, you know, I don't know who's going to see this, but I would like to share a few things,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'd like you, if you know, I don't know the technology, but I'd like you to post it.
Yeah.
So since we're, again, look at Darwin, embrace change.
Yep.
Every day, embrace change. Deal, I'll give, listen to my father. Look at everybody in your organization. Look at the people that you say, man, I need to be more like him or her, and embrace what they do, and make sure you're looking at other people that are doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, and making sure you're learning from that experience. When you're at any level of the organization, I don't care if you're a newbie, value everybody in the organization. The same thing, listen to them. They'll share information by osmosis. You'll get stronger. And as an executive, mind that organization and make sure that those people are given an opportunity to contribute at a higher level. And you know, early in life, people are like, you know, maybe it's all about position, maybe it's all about money, um, and it really isn't. So, when you're at a certain point in your career, look at the intersection between want and need. Right, everything you're going to get in life, you're going to give something up for. Okay, so if you want, and you're not going to give anything up, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
You know, so I would have you take a look at that. Constantly challenge your personal toolkit. Don't be a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
Continue to embrace things. Read you know, most young kids don't read the paper today. So wherever you get your information, read 5 different versions of the story. Don't just believe the Kool-Aid from a fire hose, the people that you like to hear from. Look at point, counterpoint.
Yeah.
P&L and balance sheet. Well, I don't need to know the P&L and balance sheet. I'm a salesperson. I'm a this, I'm a that. I don't care what you do in any organization, knowing the P&L and balance sheet will always, always be disproportionately beneficial for you. Constantly work on your communications, written communication. So in an organization where I had 7,000 employees, they didn't meet me every week. But when I had good, consistent communication, either in email or in personalized communication, another thing, don't ever, ever send dear employee letters.
Yeah.
If you can't figure out who your employee is, then you're not in the right job. Make sure you know their name and try to personalize as much as you can. And then I think, you know, constantly learn from your mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Believe it or not, the more decisions you are, you're going to make mistakes. So easy for me to say, and I've had to do it. Leave them behind. Leave them behind. Learn from them. Go forward at full light speed. And if you work hard, as my father, I'll give you another fatherism. A lot of hard work creates a lot of good luck.
Yep.
So Ben, it's been great. I appreciate it. Thanks you had some challenging questions I haven't had before. So
Yeah.
I hope I didn't bounce around too much. I hope I gave you
No, it's been great, and I hope we could even follow up on this once we get a little bit of feedback. I'm sure once I post this, edit it, there'll be questions that come along too, and even more so, just following up on a lot of things that you elaborated on today. I think within the next 2 to 3 months, there's just going to be so much economic change that with your fundamental principles can still apply without having everyone have to transition into this quote unquote technology environment. And it's going to come down to the fundamentals of still being able to communicate with your upper management and having that personal interaction with your employees.
This little turnaround I'm doing now is $100 million company, and
yeah,
the first thing I gave the staff when I came in the first week was my operating philosophy, and said, you want to know what's going to go on here? Read these 7 or 8 points. This is how we're going to operate. You're going to see me very consistent. So they all have, a lot of them have them posted on their The pod philosophy's already been embraced.
Yeah.
And that company, we're making light speed changes there, and I'm seeing smiles on the faces rather than some things that when I got there. So it's been fun. And stay tuned. More. I've got another big turnaround in the wind, I think.
Forward to it.
All right, man.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Okay. My
Let's catch up
pleasure.